Hello and welcome everyone, marhaba. Today we are going to look at how to do a lateral cephalometric tracing with the Eastman analysis. If you are considering sitting the membership of orthodontics examination by the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh, this would be an analysis that you would like to know. The Eastman analysis is a rather simple and straightforward analysis. However, before starting, I will just try to allude to some important facts. You need a good quality lateral ceph that shows you the soft tissue outline, the hard tissue components, and the dental components. And with Picchetti's recent work, you would be also interested in the CBMI. The basic armamentarium required for a good tracing is a millimeter rule with a protractor, good quality pencils, and a razor. In the membership examination, when you are provided with an X-ray, such as a lateral ceph, they encourage you to have what they call an eyeballing. So have a look at the X-ray first before you get started with the details. For example, just by looking at this lateral ceph, we know it is a class 3 skeletal base. This one, on the other hand, is showing us to be more a class 1. And the one which we are going to trace today, as you have guessed it by now, is of course more a class 2. So by eyeballing it, you get a general feel of what the lateral ceph will be like when you trace it. Now let's look at the different components of the Eastman analysis. The Eastman analysis is a very simple, straightforward analysis, and I really like it because it provides you with the basic information with the skeletal, the dental, and also the other components that are required in most cases. So nearly 80% of your cases in orthodontics can be evaluated by this simple, straightforward Eastman analysis. So let's get started. You will require your lateral ceph to be placed in position on the light box. And in this light box, of course, we have the clamps, and that keeps them nice and stable. What you will want is that your lateral ceph, whilst it's being traced on a good quality acetate paper, the matte surface, of course, is the one that you will keep outside. And in order to keep it nice and stable, I would advise put a little tiny sticky tape on it. So here we go. We start with simply using the outline of the soft tissues. And as you trace that, you are getting the outline of the nose, the soft tissues of the upper lip, the lower lip, and the chin, or the pogonian. My next area of interest would be to draw the outline to sella turcica, followed by the orbitae. The PTM is another important landmark, and we'll come to that later. This is the machine porion, and after that, you can trace the maxillary base, which is the anterior nasal spine, with a point A, the deepest point, and trace it as far as you can. That is visible to the posterior nasal spine, and complete it. Here there are plenty of overlapping proclined incisors. In this case, use the most proclined incisor outline and trace the roots and complete the maxillary base. Followed by the mandibular. So again, there are overlapping crowded low incisors. Go ahead, trace the one which is most proclined, followed by the outline of the mandibular symphysis, and then moving on to the condylar region, the base of the mandible. After that, for superimposition purposes, you would require the ID canal. Now we are going to go into the posterior dental region. So the first molars, the upper first molar, which is restored in this case, and also, if you can, outline the cuspal region of the second premolars. So now we have completed the soft tissue, the skeletal, and the dental. The PTM can also be used sometimes for superimposition purposes, and hence it is required to be placed in. Coming to the Bichetti's CVMI, it helps us to find out the skeletal age for the individual, and it's a good idea to even trace that. If not all, just the cervical 2, 3, and 4 should be sufficient. So there you have it. At times, it's also good to trace the third molar follicle or developing molar for superimposition purposes as well. So this is really a very simple, basic tracing. In the sala-turcica area, you can mark it, the center of it, with a small cross. For the next part, of course, is the analysis in itself. And this is how we can do it. You have marked your sella, you've marked your nasion, and you need to create certain planes. And this is where the protractor would come in use. First of all, we connect the nasion sella, which is your cranial base reference, followed by the ANS PNS, which is the anterior nasal spine to posterior nasal spine, as the maxillary reference, and gonian to mentone, which is your mandibular reference. These angles become the angles which we have alluded to over here. As you can see, they don't meet up in the paper, so you have the reference of trigonometry parallelism. By paralleling it, you can easily make your angles on the same paper. So we go around and we can just parallel it and do it here, as you can see. And we look at it here. So I'm going to start with the maxillary mandibular plane angle, just to make sure that I can read that off. And as we can see here, it is around 21, 22, 23 degrees. So 23 degrees to the maxillary mandibular plane angle, which is just telling us that it is a relatively short face height. The SN maxillary plane angle, which is right here, is generally speaking 8 degrees plus minus 3. And so we are having 5, 6, 7, which is, it is within the norm. What it states is that we can use our Eastman correction factor. Now let's go to the more important one, sella nasion to point A. So creating that line of cranial base to maxillary base, and then of course to the mandibular. And in this case, they are relatively the same, if you can see. So it's interesting to see that they are almost at the same reference plane. So we need to measure this angle, and placing it here, it is 75, 76 degrees. And there is hardly, because of the pencil thickness as well, I would say it is almost the same, or 75 degrees for SNB. What it tells us, A and B is 1 degree. And that is actually incorrect, because it does give us a class 2 relationship. And that is where the Eastman correction factor comes in. The Eastman correction factor, to summarize, is simply when the SN maxillary plane angle is between the norm, that you can apply the correction within this area to these figures. What it means is that generally if SNA is 81 degrees, and if it is less, Here you have a difference of 5 degrees. You can add 2.5, that is 5 degrees divided by 2, 2.5 into this, and if it is there, it's 3.5, or rounded up to 4 degrees. That is a class 2 skeletal base. Let's continue with our dental correction now and see how procline the upper incisors. So just from the incisal tip to the root, and the same for the lower. And now with reference to the mandibular plane, you can see what is the incisor relationship. And in this case, it is 89 degrees. So it is a relatively retroclined, whereas the upper incisor, if you look at it, is 118 degrees. 118 degrees is relatively proclined. So upper incisors are definitely looking more proclined, and the lower incisors are very much upright. Coming to the interior lower face height, how do we calculate that? Simply stated, it is actually a numerical value. So you need to drop a perpendicular from your maxillary plane and observe how many millimeters. In this case, it's 58, and it's a formula. So I'm going to write it down here. So the upper face height is 58 plus the lower face height, which is from the maxillary plane, again, dropped 2, and it is about 64. And then this lower face height is the important bit. We go on top and we calculate it. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Coming to width analysis, it is the functional occlusal plane. So you try to have the cusps of posterior and the incisal edge of the interior. You then drop a perpendicular from point A and point B. And in this case, again, because of the thickness of the lead pencil, we can see it's only less than a millimeter difference. So what width is telling us, it is perhaps a skeletal 1 base. So it is a borderline skeletal 1 and class 2 base. Let's do this analysis and calculate what is the value for the lower face height. So simply stated, it is a total face height, which is the denominator, and that gives you 52.4%. So what it has told us again here is that the lower face height is rather reduced, and we have excessively proclined upper incisors, nearly upright lower incisors, and the skeletal base is not too bad because it is coming at the borderline of skeletal 1 through WITS, which stands for Witwatersrand University in South Africa. And Jacobson was the one who analyzed this because he took away the cranial base issue and brought it into the dental region for better analysis of the dental relationship rather than with reference to the cranial base. So if we were to recap, we have done the Eastman analysis simply by having a skeletal analysis component, the dental analysis component, and of course you can always do the soft tissue analysis with E-line or Horvath analysis if required. In his case, he's pretty balanced. So to summarize, if I was to consider what is the type of treatment I would like to give this particular individual, it would be, because of the lower face height being reduced and the upper incisors excessively proclined, a class 2 corrector can be used. This case has also been shown in the text for your future reference.